It is now officially the start time. In fact, we've just passed the start time, so I will formally start the presentation by introducing myself. First of all, Dave Smith, I'm the host for this meeting, and John Birch, our chairman, is co-hosting. Should I have a sudden attack of apoplexy and whatever, it will take over. This is being recorded, as are all the presentations today. So, watch your language and all the rest of it. And I'll introduce everybody to Phil Healey-Pearce, who's going to entertain us and educate us on the use of, or his use of, laser cutting. So over to you, Phil.
Okay, well, well, thank you. I'm the owner of Intentio. I didn't want to talk about Intentio products specifically today. I just thought it might be useful for the members to talk about or have any questions about laser cutting in general, and I'll be happy to assist with any of those answers. And if you want to ask me about my kits or anything along those lines, I'll be more than pleased to answer that.
Yeah, there's two ways we can do this. There is the chat facility, which I hope everybody is familiar with. If you want to send a message to Phil to ask him a question, you can address it. Well, address it to me, because whilst Phil's talking, he probably won't be, I won't say capable, but it's inconvenient to read a message and talk at the same time. So if you want to send a message to me, or depending on how many people participate, you could always just unmute yourself for a few seconds, ask the question, but we prefer you to keep muted in case of any extraneous background noise like dogs barking and phones ringing and so on. Anyway, that's that. I'll kick off, if you like, Phil, by asking a question. One thing that always intrigues me, I'm familiar with the principle of laser cutting, but I noticed that on the kits that you produce, there's an element of laser engraving as well, planking, for example, and representation of brickwork and that sort of stuff. How is that actually achieved without burning all the way through the material?
Well, the laser works cuts by a laser beam. We can appreciate that, but there's a number of settings that form the way the laser beam works. So you have a speed setting, so speed and power are relative to the depth of the cut into the material, the substrate. But also very important is the artwork. So on the particular laser that I have, if I make in the artwork a line that's say 0.5 mil wide, I can set the machine to cut or engrave a line that's 0.5 mil wide. And then by manipulating the speed and the power, I can get a certain element of depth control. I also have an additional setting on my laser where I can control the height of the bed, which is effectively controlling the focus. And by taking the laser slightly out of focus, like you would when you take your spectacles off, you get an unfocused image, or the beam is actually wider. And that wide beam, if it's a high-powered wide beam, will cut a wider piece in the work in one pass.
So it's all a combination of speed and power. Speed,
power, and focus are your three levers for controlling the depth and the width of your cut.
Yeah. Into a sort of another context, it's a bit like soldering white metal with a not a temperature controlled soldering iron. If you're ever so quick, you can get away with it, but if you dwell, you'll burn a hole through it. That's
absolutely
an analogy, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, the different lasers work differently, but generally speaking, you have a setting of 0 to 100% of power and a 0 to 100% of speed, and it is just manipulating those settings to get the desired effect. Clearly, on a cut, it's going to be high power, slower speed. and on engraving you can go to a faster speed, as we were just talking about before. I can do up to, I think, about 4 meters a second. But again, then usually you'd have a much lower power because you don't want to cut through the wood. You need to engrave or mark the surface.
In my days when I was producing kits, I did inquire about having certain components laser cut. Now, these components were made from copper-clad material, copper-clad fiberglass board, printed circuit board. And a couple of companies who I approached reckoned that they couldn't do it. One said it was because the copper is too reflective. The other company said that they could do it, but they doubted that I'd get a very good finish on through the substrate because of the reflectiveness of the glass particles in the fiberglass. The beam would be bounced all over the place, and you wouldn't get a good cut. Is that
well?
Would that now be possible?
I think firstly, most people with laser cutters wouldn't be able to mark the copper. You'd need, with a CO2 laser, you'd need quite a high wattage to be able to do much cutting of that at all. I have seen people though with fiber lasers engrave and cut copper clad really well. And I, in terms of cost effectiveness to etching, I'm not sure if the laser is anywhere cost effective, but it is possible, and the results are really good. Whether copper clad on the sort of circuit board type material is one that would lend itself to a nice cut, I'm not sure. It may come down to the actual the material the copper clad's on isn't very good for cutting cleanly. But the actual cutting of the copper or many metals with a laser can be quite good. And if you see on YouTube where they've cut steel with a laser, the edge is pretty good.
Yeah. Well, we now see laser cut components within kits, don't we? Coupling rods and valve gear parts and that sort of thing.
Oh, right, I hadn't realised that, but that's nice. That's nice. Well, the lasers has come on massively over the last 20 years, probably particularly over the last 5 years, because the price has just come down on them. A bit like the microwave oven, nobody had one until and the price came down. Everyone seems to have one now.
Yeah. Rather like 3D printers.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Who would have thought when we started in the hobby all these years ago, or all those years ago, that the technology would be as it, like it is today?
I think you're absolutely right. I think the hobby is a broad church, and the latest technologies enable people who were not necessarily great at model making, but suddenly with their IT skills are able to produce something on the computer, and then with a 3D printer or a laser be able to produce really high quality items that they've never been able to do with a rule and a piece of plastic strap and a knife. So I think in some ways it's enabled a lot of people that wouldn't have been able to enter the hobby with any degree of skill to do so.
Yeah,
that's certainly really what I found, as you know, Phil. For everybody else present, Phil and I know each other fairly well, I suddenly found I could produce what I wanted via the sort of skills that I had, which are not particularly great pure model making skills, but I can do the odd 2 and 3D drawing, as Phil knows. And I think the other thing, Phil, with everybody here, first of all, I think we should ask, are there any questions from anybody? And if you want to, you can unmute and just ask. And if not, one thing I think, Phil, you might talk about is obviously a great deal of what you produce are buildings, and some of your thinking about building design, to the extent you're not giving away all your secrets.
You cut out then there, John, I'm afraid. Just
I'm sorry.
question again.
I don't know how much you heard then. No, I would think people, given that a lot of what you do are buildings or structures, I wonder whether you would like to talk a little bit about how you actually go about designing the components that go into a structure.
Well, I can, and I might be able to share. I can't share my screen because
I can probably allow you to do that. If you just talk amongst yourselves for a minute.
I mean, I cut structures because, as I said, the hobby is a broad church, and what I like about the hobby is the infrastructure. I was brought up in the 70s, and everywhere I looked, we had a road that was trying to be modern, but actually what it was it ran on Victorian network, and I loved the look of all the old stations. Even though a lot of the more branch lines had been shut, the infrastructure was still there, hadn't been demolished into retail parks when I was growing up. And it was just good to wander around and look at these fantastic old buildings that were built far better than modern buildings are today. And it was the architecture that I really, liked. And when I had the opportunity to develop that and make laser cut buildings, it was a godsend, because I hardly know the right end of the soldering iron from the hot end, so I was never going to be making etched kits. I wasn't great at painting, so it's really, I'm trying to find my place in the hobby that I actually wanted to contribute with.
I've just made you host, Phil, temporarily, so you can now share with whatever you wanted to show us.
So I think you might be seeing my design screen. Can you see that, everyone?
Yeah, we can see that.
So what we have here is a commission project for Shrewsbury signal box. And let's see, just need to get rid of that, right. So essentially what I do is just draw common parts and then make them, so I've drawn just the signal box window and made that a common part. So I put in the header bricks here. This orange line is where I want the header, where I want the edge of the brick to be finished. But because the laser has a curve and it's only 0.2 mil, but that's still quite a lot when you're looking for accuracy, the cut path is this magenta line here. Can you see that?
Yep, yep.
So when I'm drawing elements, I do an outline of where I want it to look once it's finished, and then I draw it in a cut path here. So that width between there and there will be burnt away with the laser beam. And also what I've done here, these white lines will be engraved, but this line here is a cut, and that's so I can engrave edge on, so I can get in the brick reveals a representation of the mortar lines. And here we have down the side. So I only have to draw this element once, and then I'll go back to the main drawing. This element's repeated again and again and again, and there's no need to draw 16 or so windows if they're all the same in the same piece. And of course, with railway architecture, there was lots of standard components. So now I've done this Lancashire and Yorkshire window. I can use that for probably all the signal boxes in the future.
Is it anything like when we're doing drawings for preparation for etched artwork, do you use different colours for different depths of cut, for example?
Yeah, so on this one here, so this is a laser file I use for cutting. So you can see here that I've got the general shape of the building here, and this red colour is the colour I've used for cut. The white colour is used for engraving. But if I go to my layer list, I've got several colours here.
Yeah.
And I usually have several colours. Probably usually for my style, it doesn't really matter which colours they are, but I use orange and magenta for labelling the drawing and doing outlines. Red and blue I invariably use for through cuts, and in various whites and blues for various types of scribing. So when I look at this line here, if I go into engrave, that's it's this one here. That's going to engrave a line with a default line weight, which I just happen to know in this software package is 0.2 mil, which is what is the effect I want to get for the thickness of the line for a 7 mil building. But if I wanted that to be wider, so to represent something, you know, wooden clad building, I can make that 40 mil. Let's have a look here. Let's get rid of the colours. Okay, so the engrave line here, I want to make that 40 mil. You can see instantly it's made the lines heavier in the and that will be taken straight through to the laser as well. So it's very controllable how thick I can do the brick courses. Let's bring those back. And over here, this is the floor piece of the interior of the legal room, and I've just scored the lines in blue because I don't need anything very heavy. So literally, the laser's going to whip across those with a very light cut, and when that's in the building, that will look like, well, hopefully, a representative of floorboards.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, and over here where I've got this part is meant to represent a wooden end, and this is like wood boarding, where the gap is much wider, and that's why those lines look a little bit heavier. This piece here in the middle is supposed to represent a vent, and I'm literally just cutting through. So these lines will be 0.2 mil wide cut, and you can just about see a little bit of daylight through those when it's on the model. And here I've got a little door here. And if you notice, I put little tabs on. So when it comes off the laser, instead of me having to pick up 4 pieces, I only have to pick up this outer, and that holds these 4 sections, makes it a bit easier. And I used to supply my kits as kits of parts, loose in a box. Well, but I was ending up with a lot of waste, which I was having to chuck away. So now I try, all the kits are being modified and changed as I speak, but every part will be in one of these little frets, so it keeps the part fresh. And actually, I'm sending my waste to my customer, so I don't have to chuck as much wood away myself, but it keeps the parts safer.
Good.
You know, back to our Shrewsbury box. These blocks. So this section is repeating. So all I need to do is draw on here, you know, or the particular brick bond. And this brick bond on this box is a particularly strange one. I think it's called Scottish bond. And I try. You know, this is probably where I like to, you know, really concentrate on the kits. Is I try and get the right brick bond for the building, and rather than doing everything is an English bond or a garden wall bond, I try and get the right bond for the kit. I think when people start picking out these different layers in the different colours, so this will probably engineering blue, and some of these bits here will be engineering blue, and these will be the red bricks. I think having the right bond just makes it, you know, makes for a better finished model.
Yeah, thanks for that, Phil.
Okay, so has anybody got any questions on this? Well, I've got this open. The package I'm using, by the way, is QCAD. Inexpensive, I've got Pro, which I think is about £20 or £30 a year, but they do a free version. It's totally does everything you need for laser cutting. No need to have anything more expensive.
Alan's just asked the question, Phil, what scale is this Shrewsbury box?
Well, I mean, I've drawn it in 7mm. So I'll give you an idea of size. It's going to be 666 mils long.
Gosh.
But actually about 100 mils wide. So it's quite a lot. And how high is that? It's about 275 mils high. So it's about, what's that? About 10 inches high.
2 foot long.
Yeah. So it's you know, so this was a commission, and it should be ready just after Christmas. We're doing 10 of these. We're doing a couple of fully painted ones, and then we've got 8 kits. A couple of kits are still available if anybody wants one. But it's you know, we think it's going to be quite an impressive building. I'm keeping one back for myself, so I'll have to negotiate with the household authorities about whether I can, you know, have this in the dining room or somewhere. But when this commission came through, it was such an impressive building in real life that I wanted to make sure that I'm, you know, in model form, I did it justice, and I wanted to, you know, wanted to have one for myself, actually.
Somebody else asking a question. Peter's asking, he's about to try his first laser cut kit, which is one of your Southern Railway concrete huts.
Okay.
I wondered if you can give him some advice on the best methods of preparing and painting.
Ooh. Well, in preparing the kit should be cut perfectly, so there shouldn't be any fettling required to put the kit together. In terms of painting the kit, I would look at the kit and assemble what you need to that are the similar colour. So leave the window frames and the doors and things until you've painted them. And I recommend that you put a primer over the kit first. Halford's car bodywork primer in grey is fantastic. It will also hide, on that particular kit, it'll also hide any of the joins in the roof section. But spray it over a primer, use some 400 grit wet and dry sandpaper just to smooth it back down if required. And then get your acrylics or your watercolors or your colored pencils out and you know, paint it the best you can. I think in terms of how to do the painting, I'm probably not the expert in that area, and there'll be others with strong opinions on how that should work. But to get to that stage, no, the kit will fit together perfectly, and just use a primer just to you know, have a good base for the paint. If you do go to my website, I do have a painting guide on there that was put together by Stephen Fay. And if you're aware of him, he's made some fantastic models over the years, and his paintwork is, you know, superb.
Question I'm surprised nobody's asked up to now. What actual material are we talking? What is your favoured?
My favourite material is ply. The material I use is MDF, and that's simply because ply is very expensive in comparison to MDF, and also for the buildings, you get a bit of a wood grain come through that's not really desirable on a brick building, whereas the MDF is extremely flat, and it gives just the right texture with a little bit of primer paint of what a real brick does. Don't like MDF. Because it's I call it a dirty material. So we run several lasers here. We've got 2 expensive Trotec style ones, and I won't put MDF on one of those because I just can't face the cleaning of the laser.
Yes, depending on the grade of MDF, because I've used quite a bit of it, some of it cuts very cleanly. Others, you get like a fluff come off it rather than dust. Yes, it is pretty
You're absolutely right, and I have my favourite sources of MDF, and I don't go for the cheapest. I go for which will cut and produce a nice finish on the laser. We've got various thicknesses of MDF, so our thinnest is 0.45 mil, and we go right up to 9 mil. And I have some MDF that's been machined specifically for myself, which is 1.75 mil thick. And the idea was that was meant to represent an O-gauge brick course height. And we use, well, I use that occasionally for doing brick courses around, for example, chimney stacks and things where you have a ring of bricks around the top.
Now, Rod's asking a question of anybody who knows the answer to this. Recommendations for painting blue engineering bricks or colours to represent blue engineering brick.
Well, Phoenix paints, I do know, do produce a blue engineering brick colour. I think it's pretty good, but as with any painting, it's all down to the beholder. So I would always, if you were doing painting with blue bricks, is pour the paint into a tray and mix in a little bit of other colours. So if you mix in a bit of red and a bit of white, you'll get the variation of what real blue bricks look like. And then again, it's about finishing the details. So once the bricks are done, it's giving them a slight weathering. Many blue brick buildings, the mortar course will leach lime over the bricks, and if you can, add that little detail through, that'll bring a fairly mundane building suddenly to life.
For what it's worth, I did some building work recently and used some blue bricks, and we ran out, so we fetched another. I think we only had to buy another 2. They were a different colour from the ones we'd previously been used. So, prototype for everything, isn't there? You don't assume that all bricks are the same colour.
Well, bricks are not definitely not the same colour. And when but the bricks, make sure you get a bit of variation in there. If you look at the painting guide that's on the website, Steve has suggested 3 or 4 different colours of red to get the various, and you can mix those colours together. Don't worry about it. And you can't muck it up, because if you do feel that you've done something that you don't like the look of, you can spray it over in grey primer and start again. Don't be afraid of it.
Yeah.
Right. Phil, we had a session with Peter Insole here, a couple of years ago, where I invited Pete to do a brick painting masterclass. And what he ended up doing, at about 8 or 9 people, including my then 8-year-old, and must be a long time ago, 8 or 9-year-old granddaughter, and a couple of others who'd never done anything like it. And he had a palette which he helped them with. And I think Peter well, I know. And the variation in the palette was incredibly subtle, but the result on the building was very, very good. And as you know from stuff he's done, it's terribly easy sometimes. I made the mistake myself of overdoing the variation of colours brick to brick, whether they're red brick or blue engineering and so forth. And he normally had 4 or 5 pools of wet paint on his palette and was going around, and he just had people going, okay, well, you take a dab of that and paint as many bricks as you fancy randomly, well, you see the results on Love Lane. I think one thing with painting brick is try and keep the variance quite low. Don't overdo that checkerboard effect.
You're right. You only need 4 or 5 different shades, and you don't have to clean the brush dipping between the different shades. Yeah. That gives you a more, more tones. And also put some gloss shades in there as well, because some of the bricks are shiny, and that'll all be toned down. So my process for painting bricks is I paint everything with red oxide primer. A Halford's acrylic primer is fine. That gives you a great base, and then with 4 or 5 different shades and maybe a little bit of black. Is I just, as you say, I just pick it all out, and it actually at that stage it can look a little bit awful, and you might be thinking, what have I done here? I've ruined this expensive model. But then when you put the mortar course in, and I use a polycell filler, which is a very fine filler. Once that's rubbed over the brickwork, that hides all the oversplashes of paint over different bricks. That brings it all together, and it looks really good at that point. And if the mortar is a bit too bright, too white, a wash over of with a black or a dark blue paint will tone the whole thing down, and of course that will also tone down the faces of the bricks as well. So just experiment, and if you do order a kit from me and it's your first time you've had a laser kit, if you just put on the order form, it's your first kit, could you have kit for free, some offcuts that you can practice a bit of painting on first. So
I don't know whether everybody else experienced that, but you broke up for a few seconds there, Phil. You certainly did on my machine. So I'd just like to repeat what that last thing you said.
I was just saying that if anybody who purchases a kit from myself, if they are new to laser cut kits, just put that on the order form, and I'll happily put some offcuts of brickwork in, so they can practice. So you can practice on a bit of offcut before if you're a bit apprehensive about using the actual kit as your first experience. So it's not a problem. I'll do that. We have quite a lot of things that we throw away, and I do keep them in a box just in case people want a practice piece.
Are all your products, Phil, architectural, or are you into rolling stock as well? Wooden bodied rolling stock, for example?
I don't make rolling stock kits, no. I do masters for another manufacturer who sells through Intentio. So he will do the design work, and I will a guy called Paul Rowley of Impressionist models. He will use my services to laser cut him the parts, which he will then assemble and then get cast in resin. But I don't actually generally make wooden rolling stock. People ask me to do the inserts for brass kit wagons and things, which we gladly do, but that's not something that we focus on. The business started because I was following my hobby interest, which was the architecture, and that's where we've gone. But the business as a whole, which is my full-time income, we do signage for businesses. We'll do engraving of coasters and things. I'm just using this is a mat that I'm just using for my drink today. I don't know if you can see that. That's actually a piece of aircraft fuselage. And this aircraft is an A400 Airbus. So a little company up the road from me buys the scrap, and I engrave it and try and add some value to it. So I think if you go to a show somewhere, specialist show, you probably pay £50 for that piece of aircraft, and that's something that we've done on our laser.
Any more questions for anybody?
Yeah, I've got one. Phil, what do you, obviously a lot of the buildings that you do will have tiled or slated roofs. How do you cope with providing that within the kit?
Well, I mean, that does depend on the scale, but as we're here as an O-gauge group, the way I do it for that scale is I provide paper slips. I do it to prototypical fashion. So I don't think people always realise, but the first row of the slates needs to be laid at 90 degrees angle to the rest of the roof, and I provide those strips on my packs, and that makes sure that the whole roof has that sort of pitch all the way up. Otherwise, if you don't do that, the first row will be flat, if that makes sense. I think I realise I haven't been very articulate in making sure people realise how to use those slates.
In building terms, the first row of slates is called the eaves row.
That's correct. Yes.
And then the next row goes straight on top of them.
That's it.
Overlapping, but overlapping horizontally. That's right, but not overlapping vertically. And then the next row that goes up, which you then nail on, that gives you the correct angle of overlap, doesn't it?
That's correct, yeah. And I've represented that in the model. And as I say, sometimes the roofs of the kit don't reach the walls, and people say, "Oh, this is, does this need filling?" No, it doesn't. It's been designed like that specifically because that will be filled over by this this horizontal level or longitudinal level of slate before you carry on with the regular laying of the slates. One thing I did want to mention is people always ask me they usually ask me, what glue should they use for laser cut kits? Now, Evo Stick wood glue in a green container is good. It's very good. But I would recommend, if you're new to laser cut kits, to actually try laser cut kit glue by Deluxe Materials. It's a very thin glue, and you can position it with a little needle applicator, and that allows the glue to get exactly where you need it, and it uses then capillary action to go into all the joints. I find that a lot better than trying to use the regular white PVA out the big tub, because whilst it's good, it gets everywhere. You have too much glue, and your glue gets on your fingertips, and before you know it, you're glue on everywhere, on your clothes and so on. So that's why I really now would favour the Deluxe laser cut glue.
There is a type of adhesive. It's called I forgot what it is called. I was going to say anaphylactic, but that's a medical term, isn't it? But it's a word similar to that. And what it is, it's a white wood glue, but it has the consistency of milk.
Yes.
And it's ideal for if you want to assemble something dry and then apply the glue afterwards. It runs, as you say, capillary action takes it up into the joints, and it works, works a treat. Whereas if you use conventional PVA glue, sometimes you can come unstuck, use the pun, because what happens is the parts start to stick together before you've got them in the final position.
Yeah. And I would say, and I would say that my kits, possible, I'd put them together dry and let the capillary action pull the glue through. It makes it much better, and you don't get glue on the front surface, which might make it a bit more difficult when you start to paint it if there's glue in the wrong place.
The only drawback with this that I've just mentioned is it's actually quite expensive.
It is. You don't need a lot of it, though.
No, that's true.
It's called aliphatic glue.
That's it. That's the word.
And if you do go down the Deluxe Materials glue, just a sort of pro tip is when you're not using it, stick the end into a wet sponge. That'll stop the glue from setting in its container.
Well, the reason I thought it was anaphylactic, John, is because it sends you into shock when you see the price of it. Right. I don't know whether we've come to our allotted time now. It's now coming up for 3:15. Can't remember whether you were supposed to be talking for half an hour or 3/4, Phil, but if you're happy to carry on for another 5 minutes,
there's one thing I just wanted to let people know is all the kits, I don't know if you can see that, are being made into retail packaging. And over the next few weeks, you'll see the kits available at Hatton's, Ellis Clark, and hopefully your local model railway shop. So just if you want to try a kit, and you can buy it from me by all means, but it's also available at those 3 other places.
Good. Well, thanks for that, Phil, and thanks for your assistance, John, and thanks to everybody else for taking part. John, I'll give you a call a little bit later. You mentioned something earlier on which prompted me to. I've got a little job which you might be able to help me with.
Okay.
It concerns 3D CAD.
Right. If I can remember it.
Okay. So anyway, thanks everybody, and enjoy the rest of the show. What's left of it, and don't forget, of course, it's the sessions have all been recorded and they'll be available to watch for a couple of weeks. Well, no, are they forever? No, I think
maybe we don't know with these. I don't know.
A month, isn't it? I think it's a month.
Yeah, hopefully.
I think we do on the show. That's right.
So you can binge watch for the next couple of days, and see what you missed. Anyway, see you all soon.
Okay, thank you everybody.
Bye,
I hope to see you at Kettering, Phil.
Yeah. Yes, I'll see you.
March.
Yeah.
Well, and everybody else for that matter. I can see Mike here, Mike Hopkins. Are you the Mike Hopkins from Leicester, Mike? He obviously can't unmute himself.
Yeah.
I am the Mike Hopkins from Leicester.
Ah, long time no see.
That's right. Yeah. Sorry,
no
sorry. There's no camera. I'm on my desktop, so I haven't
right.
got a camera on that. So.
Hopefully you'll venture down to Kettering next March, will you?
Oh, I will do, most definitely.
Good. All right.
Yeah.
Cheers
See you then.
Cheers, everybody.
Bye.